If ye seek, ye shall find. Because no mystery is closed to an open mind. We keep you up to date so you can decide your own fate. Welcome to Maxim Axiom Radio. Welcome to Maxim Axiom Radio, folks. I am your host, Roger Sylver, and today we have with us none other than the esteemed Mr. Sasha Stone, founder of the New Earth Nation at www.newearthnation.org and host of Face to Face with Sasha Stone on the Conscious Consumer Network at www.consciousconsumernetwork.tv. And with that, Sasha, infinite thanks for appearing on Maxim Axiom Radio today, brother in arms. So let's go ahead and hit the ground running, shall we?
Roger, delightful to be with you here. I'm not so sure about the prefix Mr., but I'm going to accept it under the circumstances.
All righty. Hey, just a form of Babylonian respect, I guess? Yeah, something like that. But for those who haven't acquainted themselves with you and your work, could you please share a bit about you and your life experiences which have led you to where you are today?
Well, that's very loaded, and I don't want to bore your listeners. But yeah, background, simply put, born and bred white African, generational African, grew up in the war in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, lived under apartheid for a short spell in South Africa, and then came across to Europe and engaged in rock and roll for many years. That was my life up until 1999, 2000, when I transitioned into peace activism, and peace activism led me into interfacing with diplomacy and politics, and that led me into the multilateral political arena of the United Nations and so on, understanding the mechanics of how the world is so fucked up and what has led us into that dystopia and myopia, civilizational myopia, and what then brings us into a status quo where we are effectively giving up consent to being harvested systemically by a system which seeks our slow death and enslavement whilst we are alive. And that has other ramifications and permutations kick off from that understanding and take us into the more supra-dimensional or hyper-dimensional aspects of so-called reality, which invite us into considering what happens when we die and how we're also harvested at death effectively. So all of that story, my own story, has really just been a pursuit or inquiry after what it is that kicked off the wrong civilizational matrix that I found myself born into, growing up in the 70s and 80s and looking around me, as do we all, and those of us who are not multi-generational Satanists, I have to say. But we wake up and we blink into the sunlight and we look around us and go, well, why can't I play? Why can't I have fun? Why can't I chase my bliss? Why am I being beaten? Why am I being herded or sequestered? Why am I being mutilated? Why am I being bullied? Why am I being cajoled, manipulated? Why is my creative expansion constantly being turned off for me by grown-ups, by a religious framework, by cultural frameworks, by intellectual prejudices, by philosophical conceit, by spiritual dysfunction? And we wake up as blinking children, invariably recently engaged with typhonic consciousness and the consciousness of the waters, the Gaia sphere. And we're born into this world and we're just butchered from birth. And my story in that sense, Roger, is no different to yours, no different to anyone who is now on a consciousness trajectory. And it only brings us to the now, and the now has a burning question, which is what then? What next? And when we engage with our sovereign expression and we become actuated in consciousness, we're able to then go, well, I don't need to ask for permission from mummy or daddy or the boss at work or the local council or, God forbid, the local government or my archbishop or my pope or my guru. All of these interceding principles need to be dispensed with. I need to stand only in honor and pure truth, and I need to engage my creative expression, and I need to define the world that I wish to live in. And I will not seek permission from any man or woman outside of self in that pursuit, but I will undertake one solemn vow on that journey, and that is to do no harm or injury to another.
Understood. Thank you. Do no harm, but take no shit, basically, is what it comes down to. Unless it comes and knocks on your front door. What do you do then?
Well, it does knock on your front door if you are carrying within your karmic load, or even within your psychological, emotional field of expression. If you are carrying a vacuum or holding a vacuum, it will be met in the explicit sense by an event, by a relationship, by a circumstance that will require you to address that vacuum within. So be quite clear that when we are engaging in actuated living and being a living being, taking full accountability for oneself in the here and now, we are required to take full accountability for all the horrors that we meet. So when there is a knock on the door, or when there is an incident which causes me discomfort or even trauma, I need to own that event, that circumstance in the moment, in the now. And I need to own that that was a perfectly, precisely attuned event or circumstance that I need to answer to. And there's always, if one is simply focused on the now, not looking to blame the government or the other driver in the car or whoever is part of that event, that circumstance, if one doesn't look to blame or judge or cause or call for any judgment in the scenario, then one is able to deal with that repertoire of experience and find an absolution point in it, find the meaning of that event, no matter how horrific the event is, and thereby grow from it. So that, to my mind, is the only way to engage with anything that happens to me, is to know that it is self-elected, that at all sorts of sub and super-dimensional levels, I am calling in those events and those circumstances, those relationships with people and with planet.
Agreed and indeed. So basically you're saying that is, bottom line, it is whatever frequency and vibration you're resonating at is what you will attract to yourself.
Without exception, without exclusion. That is universal law. It's how it plays out. If anyone regards themselves as a victim of circumstance, then they have failed in achieving any fruitful understanding of life or themselves, and they will continue to hurt as a direct result. So one stops hurting in any way, in point of fact, when you engage this pure truth, because you can no longer hurt. Everything that does bruise you or causes discomfort, you can begin to see it coming from around the corner. Provided you are, again, standing in the flame of pure truth. God, I sound very sanctimonious talking like that, but God, I mean it. When you're standing in that flame of pure truth and you are attuned to the universal mind, which is informing you at the, hyperdimensional level on all sorts of subtle planes, you're being informed by the real reality that encompasses the mutant reality syndrome that you're inhabiting. And so you're able to govern your actions, your words, even your thoughts, with far more precision when you're standing in that flame. It's a place of insecurity because it's where It's where angels fear to tread. We're talking about, you know, Daniel in the lion's den. And that fearlessness is essential to being able to trigger your connection to universal mind. But once that trigger is engaged and you are able to then actuate your psionic intelligence, your intuitive capacity, your telepathic intelligence, and that's the intelligence which is the gut, the central intelligence that will navigate you through any scenario. And that is walking through the valley of death. That is the guide. That is the Christ flame in your center. When you stop idolizing the Christ figure or the Jesus totem, which is an idol. And if you stop worshiping any of those idols outside of self and recognize that that bodhisattva, that Christ flame, that Krishna element is, or that Brahma element is inside of you. It is the quintessence of the divine spark of the Homo sapiens sapien that you represent in the temporal plane. I hope that explains it somehow.
Oh, it for me, precisely, wholeheartedly, and succinct to the point. Now, all right, for those who are still of the, you know, following the religious persuasion, much of my family does back in the States, many people, especially here in England, very Victorianized. I go out every day and I see the male populace, and it's like they have been castrated. Their male has been pulled out of them. Their warrior, if you will, is gone. You know, what do people do to reconnect with that primal part of the soul that they have so freely given away onto others who feel they can make better decisions about their lives, having not met them, of course? For those in the religious aspect, how do they go from worshiping something outside of themselves to actually understanding the god/goddess power they have within them, and to bring that forward to and for the betterment of all?
Well, there were many questions there. Essentially, they are the same question. Look, there is no one size fits all. One necessarily needs to couch that answer in a careful way when you're dealing with people who have attributed their lives and their entire conceptual framework to a religious persuasion. I mean, one doesn't want to go and kick the shit out of people's sacred cows and get a sense of pleasure out of it. But at the same time, one absolutely invites others to put a silver bullet into the chamber and kill their own sacred cows. So how do we do that? I don't wish to trash other people's sensibilities, but I do have no issue with speaking the truth that I know. And if that hurts someone's sensibilities, then so be it. Look, to a hardline fundamentalist Christian, it's a lost cause. Don't bother. Anyone who is vehemently addicted to the idolatry of Jesus the Master is beyond help in many cases, in most cases. Anyone who is out there thundering along and proselytizing at every turn, forget it. Don't waste your breath. And I mean, don't waste your breath. And the same applies to fundamentalist Muslims, fundamentalist Hindus, fundamentalist anything. Any kind of fundamentalism is closed-minded, closed-hearted by definition. So don't waste God-given energy on that. In the first instance, my credo is not to preach or teach to anyone who does not ask the question under any circumstances. It's not necessary. It's not invited. You asking a question, I'll happily answer it. But I do not go out proselytizing, nor will I ever. How do men who are in the main beer-swilling Neanderthals throwing fists in bar fights, farting and burping and scratching their gonads through life before they meet an early death? How do we get to that breed of Neanderthal male that we're seeing prevailing all around the world? It's a hard one, because that kind of creature who is fueled by pornography and bloodlust alone and by ego saturation is someone on a journey in the experiential 3D field of so-called reality, and they are wanting to get into car crashes. They're wanting to get into train wrecks. They're wanting to explore the 3D field of so-called reality in a way which arguably you and I would find very distasteful and very hurtful. And again, what resonance they're putting out, what vibrational frequency they're putting out in terms of bloodlust and anger is going to meet them squarely. Obviously, those kinds of males, the ones that throw punches very quickly, the ones that are territorial about their women, about their families, about their religion, about their community, about their bullshit little reality, those are not men who are even going to understand that they do not represent strength. They are representing the very worst kind of weakness and vulnerability in humankind. That real strength is a different kind of fire. It's where one is able to step outside of the pack and not need to accept the invitations to the pub or to the bar or to the party or to the barbecue, but one is beginning to reconnect with learning, with self-education, with spiritual inquiry, with standing outside of the herd and beginning to define a real reality for oneself and one's family. That's when real manhood emerges in that flame of self-inquiry. But then the same thing is said of women. I know women who have that same pornographic, bloodlusting mindset, and it's just frequency X and above, or frequency X and below. As I see it increasingly in the world, the human family are either vibrating at the heart frequency and below, or heart frequency and above, and that pulling apart, that bifurcation of the human family is a very needful and relevant manifestation, because it's where the wheat becomes separated from the chaff, to use an old biblical expression, which ironically is the kind of expression being used by idiot Midwestern Christians who are holding to idolatry and know nothing about the Christ flame. But there you have it. It's a very contrary reality that we inhabit.
All understood. Now, you've given a statement, and I'm going to ask a question after I read your statement, all right? As we emerge from an ancient galactic sleep, we are all fictions, more or less, living fictitious lives governed by ever greater fictions. Now, for those who are still sleepwalking and or just awakening from their spiritual slumber, could you please elaborate more on what it is you are sharing in that statement for better individual understanding, please?
Yes, in very simple terms. You have been co-opted at birth, every single one of you listening to this, without exception. You were indentured into slavery by slavery contracts that were put into place by so-called government. Babylonian priesthoods is my preferred expression, because that more perfectly describes the invisible hand, or so-called invisible hand, that has been driving governments, certainly in the last 300 years, which incidentally is within the time span that governments have effectively emerged. But these governments have been part of an orchestrated technology to harvest human time and energy. So we are discussing here pure Canaanite ritualism in the modern context, in the 21st century, 20th century, 19th century, and 18th centuries principally. And all of this is forensically evidenced to anyone who gives a damn and will actually do the math or do the homework to look into it. Certainly my own colleagues in the New Earth Nation, within the law and governance faculty, within the International Tribunal that we have launched, and so on, are people who have worked tirelessly to provide the resources, the kind of learning that people need. And so that I can point out websites that people can go to. But there are a great many folks out there, principally in the United States, it must be said, and Canada and Australia and Great Britain, who are leading the way in sovereignty and in educating others as to the truth of how we have been indentured into slavery from birth. I don't want to repeat myself here for those folks who know my work and don't want to hear me repeat the same thing, because I've said it in so many other places. But the business of the birth bonds, how your birth certificate of live birth is effectively flipped into a birth registration certificate, and how that birth registration certificate is then flipped into a de facto birth bond, which is then traded on the stock market in your country, held by the Treasury or by the state and the Crown, never revealed to you. You are simply a birth bond that is traded, which is your fictitious identity, which is the Mr. Sasha Stone or the Mr. Mrs. Whoever. That is the fiction, the big block black capital letters that you're required to put down on every form that the government invites you to fill out. And of course, they only invite you to fill out the forms, including the tax forms. They're invitations. Don't accept them. It is insane for you to accept the invitations to fill out the tax forms. There are relatively simple ways of addressing this particular serpent and beating its brains out. And I suggest that people wise up quickly and learn how to do it. It's all based on contract. It's all based on your permission, your consent, whoever you are. And I don't care if you have an education or not. The very best law experts that I deal with now on a daily basis are people who receive no education at all. I received no education for that matter. So just wise up, get interested enough in pure truth, get interested enough in real reality, get interested enough in the real thing that we call liberty or freedom, and step away from the bullshit propaganda mind fuckery that is sold to you on a minute-by-minute basis by your idiot television screens and your idiot social networking Twitter feeds, teaching you about peace and liberty and democracy being franchised to the world by your treasonous and fraudulent governments, who are all bloodlusting, harvesting technologies funded by you, the taxpayer, meaning to say that your soul story, your soul's journey has been also enmeshed into Canaanite ritualism and bloodlust, the plunder and the massacre of innocents all around the world. For any of you who know to discover news outside of CNN, because you're never going to get it there. In any event, please prevent me from rambling on too much on this.
Oh, no. It's all right, because the path I'd like to take today is basically based on what we're speaking about now, your quote, your answer to that quote, but also very connected to your January episode 2 face-to-face show, when government declares war on the people. Now we find ourselves today, right here, right now, being chemtrailed from the skies. We find ourselves that they're locking down the borders, such as like in America right now. I have caught wind by the beginning of 2016. You are supposed to have, well, you are going to be issued, whether you want it or not, if you want to travel domestically within the United States borders, a smart ID and or a smart driver's license that is RFID tagged, and you will basically be tracked wherever you're going within the United States. There also, I want to speak about Jade Helm.
No, you won't, if you don't wish to, and if you don't give your consent, and if you stop acquiescing and falling onto the back foot. So in the first instance, let's just apprehend the words. No, you are not going to have that happen if you choose not to have that happen. But you're going to have to engage in right action to prevent that from happening. You see, it always comes back to this. It always comes back to you, and you having to actually do something to prevent that stuff happening to you. We're not victims. None of us are victims. I've not paid taxes since 1997, okay? You think that the establishment don't know who I am and don't know where to find me? The hell they don't. But the point is this: I do not consent. I do not give my permission at the soul level, at the temporal level, at any level. I do not acquiesce. I do not consent. And if one understands the words, if one imbues the truth of these words in one's cells and one's atoms, you become the hyper-dimensional, supra-subdimensional technology that prevents anything from moving in to you and your expression, your divine expression. I'm not going to tiptoe into the woo-woo here. This is science, people. This is pure science. If you understand the works of Nicholas Tesla and Velikovsky and Schauberger and Reich and all of these great, and even Einstein for that matter, but please forget about Newton in the main. If one understands the real reality of who and what we are as a divine spark, an emissary, a son and a daughter of God incarnate, every single one of us, and if that scares you, be scared. If you think that that is, defiling your interpretations of religion, deal with it. But that is what we are, sons and daughters of God, every one of us. I believe that every great Madhu and saint and spiritual avatar and Christ figure in the history of the world has maintained that same notion, incidentally. When your Bibles and your scriptures and your Gnostics have not been co-opted and rewritten and butchered by goddamn priests in history who have been operating as Jesuits on behalf of all sorts of political agendas. So we are it, man. We are the shit. We determine what happens to us as we move forward. Jade Helm, I couldn't give a proverbial fuck about Jade Helm. Forgive my bad language today. You got me on a good one.
No worries.
But I don't give a damn about Jade Helm. This is another disinfo, double disinfo exercise. Who cares? Who knows? It does not impact on me. It's not going to impact on the good people of America if they don't consent. One, any man in a costume who assaults you or your family or your neighbors, beat the shit out of them. Apprehend them then and there. Do exactly to anyone in a costume what you would do to another living soul if they attacked you or attacked your family. Do not respect a costume, a uniform. It is insane that we give our permission or our consent or give our a sense of a hierarchy to a costume or to a crown or a state or a government or a council, federal, municipal, whatever. These are all goddamn fictions. They don't exist outside of the imagination. So why is it that we allow them to take away our power? Why do we surrender our innocence, our goodness, our decency to these systems which are faceless, which hide behind seals, hide behind walls that you will never penetrate? Stop giving permission. Do not fill out the forms. Do not pay the taxes, which incidentally are not taxes at all. They are invitations for you to defraud yourself. If you understand how economics works, if you understand how the birth bond issue works, you are being invited to defraud yourself. Do not go into that. That's standing out of honor. That's actually standing outside of law, in which which is to suggest that when you are paying taxes, you are committing fraud against yourself. There are so many things like this, Roger. So many simple, big, bold, beautiful brushstrokes that we can familiarize ourselves with to enable us to step outside of this proverbial matrix and engage a life that we want to manifest, one which carries our bliss, one which allows us to project our plasma, our aura into this entire realm and spread love and serendipity and noble expression and kindness and goodness and decency for the love of Christ. We should all be doing that all the time. We should be building beautiful places to live in, not being restrained by goddamn statutes and ordinances dreamt up by idiot little gray-hearted technocrats and bureaucrats who then operate as cashiers on behalf of a goddamn parliament, which also acts as cashiers on behalf of a goddamn crown or state, which in turn is acting as a franchise of Baphomet and the serpent itself. This is a question of each one of us waking up, peeling away the onion that is my own ignorance. Nothing is being done to me. I'm not a victim in any of this. I have consented to everything that occurs in my life.
Understood. And I would have to say that right now, in my particular situation that we spoke about before we started the show, they're not trading shit on my birth bond, birth certificate, if you will, and they have not been able to since, oh God, well, it's been quite some time now, and like you, I've not filed any taxes since the mid-90s. So we are being the change we wish to see down here, right? How do people become the individuals they wish to be, to come together into a collective for the betterment of all?
In my considered view, the first thing one has to do is to understand what it is that we're talking about. For anyone who understands the conversation, I'm not being patronizing here, but what we have discussed, you and I, in the last 35 minutes has been, to some people, would be very ambiguous. To others, it would be very esoteric. But it is very necessary that people understand the distinction between what is real and what is fictitious. And I'm going to go back to the simple source code here, that people and the planet, the earth itself, are real. You and I, flesh and blood, living men, are real. The soil that we stand upon, Roger, is real. Our relationship with each other is real, and our relationship with the soil that we stand upon is real. Everything else in this world is a fiction, be clear. Everything else is a fiction. Homes, businesses, governments, borders, papers, all of it, fictions that we've dreamt up, imagined into manifestation, or have been imagined into manifestation to govern and control us and our divine expression. Now, if this stuff matters to you, if you understand what's being said here, then there are steps that you can take to engage the real reality. And you can do a soul revocation exercise, one. And anyone can check out the New Earth Nation to access that on the New Earth Project. But it's an important one. It's a pledge. It's changing allegiance. One can do the Declaration of Sovereignty, which we also promulgate through the New Earth Nation, the New Earth Project. Available on the various websites there. But engaging the Declaration of Sovereignty is real. It's not a kid's game. Once you've engaged that declaration and put your mark there, you can do it electronically through the portal if you like, and that becomes logged. And that is now protected by a new law jurisdiction as well, incidentally, globally. So you can engage that process if you like. You can also engage the micronation process, where you determine yourself, or your family, your community, your home, your farm, your dwelling as a micronation. And then you establish a constitution. This is pure law, folks. This is real law. And you establish a constitution. And we can help walk you through that. Let me just finish this off.
Okay.
Once you've engaged that micronation, then with its constitution, this is pure law. You then treaty with the New Earth Nation, which is the planetary family of satellite micronations. Once you've established that form of dependence, of self-governance, of auto-determination, using pure law, trust and equity, this is the premise of all law, Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, everything issues of this. You're entitled to do it. You got to wise up. You got to stop the addictions to alcohol, to the trivia that's on Facebook. You got to stop your addictions to the idiocy of the high street and of MTV culture and of watching television. And you've got to engage with what is real, not what is fictitious. If that matters to you, again, then do it. Step into that hallowed space. That's the real sacrament. Not kneeling before some witless priest who's sticking things in your mouth and making you drink the proverbial blood of Christ. What a ghastly notion. Please step away from these Saturnian fictions that have been foisted onto us generationally.
How would you go about explaining to someone who wants to give up their passport? Well, get to where they need to go first, I guess, would be the way to do it, right? Before giving up their fake strawman account.
Well, look, you're entitled to keep that, Roger. You're entitled to keep the fake strawman stuff. That stuff has been put together and entered manifestation, piggybacking you. So you're entitled to lay claim to that if you choose to. You're entitled to use your passports and all the rest of those nonsense identification papers and cards if you choose to. You have ownership over them if you want them, and that does not mean that you are then not entitled to create your real identity and put that out as your real identity. So again, there's ways and ways of navigating that, and we are teaching people through the ITNJ committee.org website. ITNJ stands for the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. That is the international court system that we have launched already. When I say we, please understand, we have serious judges, prosecutors, constitutional law experts, hundreds of barristers, actually thousands of lawyers and scholars in law who have contributed toward the realization of the ITNJ. And that the ceremonial seating of that is on the 15th of June this year. For those interested, itnj.org, or go to the itnjcommittee.org, and that's where the resource is online for people to learn about the birth bonds and about the indentured servitude and the slavery contracts and the governments, the corporations masquerading as governments, which is the devil in our midst that needs to be now taken down.
Understood. Thank you. Now, you also brought up EFRA, created by Chris Cleverly, and it's Emerging People's Human Rights Authority is what it stands for, and how it ties into the ITNJ, excuse me, and how far along is this process? What are going to be some of the solutions to people's problems out there? Because there are many people are looking for somewhere to go. They're looking for folks to stand up and be the change they wish to see, I guess, before they start claiming their sentient self-responsibility, right? And I'm really glad that you folks are doing this. Go ahead.
I don't have any respect for people who are waiting for someone else to open the door. And I think that if they are honest with themselves, listening into this, they will know the truth of what I'm saying, and they will not have fundamental respect for themselves either. It is not suitable when we are facing catastrophic failure of our environment, of the social ecology of the planet, of the economy of the planet. We are on auto-destruct right now. We are being driven by Satanists, Luciferians, secret cabals and Masonic orders and Jesuit orders, which seek our destruction. This is not conspiracy. This is forensically evidenced for anyone, again, who cares to know the truth of things. So it's a matter for each person to recognize that they are the key that needs to enter the door. They are also the door. And when they unlock the door, they find themselves on the other side of that door, their true selves, their true lives. What are you afraid of, for God's sake? We're all having heart attacks anyway. We're all getting cancers anyway. We're all suffering painful, long, slow, early death anyway. We are being completely harvested and massacred and butchered anyway. So what the fuck are you afraid of? It makes no sense to be afraid of the system, of what might happen if you step out the front door in pure truth. It makes no sense. It only makes sense to engage that flame within your center, because that is life-giving, life-innovating, life-affirming. To enter into one's own sovereign jurisdiction as a living man or living woman, stand up from the sofa, turn off that godless screen, stop reading the bullshit magazines and novels, start engaging with your divine purpose. Why the hell were you born into this world at this time? It was not to read cheesy novels. It was not to watch reruns of Rihanna's latest hit. So much more to become, so much more to explore. so much more to evoke in this reality. And I would say to all those folks, I'm not going to give you the sweet pill. I'm not going to give you the spoon feeding. And yes, we can take any particular situation or scenario. We could spoon feed someone and walk them out of their false identity and into the light of reality. But it's for them to engage that journey. There are many, many tools out there that have been laid out. The ITNJ is the law jurisdiction that you can call upon. You know, the 0 point bank exchange that the New Earth nation launches late summer this year is also a tool, a fundamental tool for people to be able to engage with sovereign expression and not be fleeced by the system, by life, by the banks any longer. So there's many tools that many brilliant people are throwing in there and giving out freely. But I can tell you that for anyone who asks the legitimate question or the real question and cares about the answer, that resource is available on the internet. And your inner guidance, your intuitive faculty will take you to what you need to read and what you need to learn. If you just take that dive, make it so. Turn off the television again.
Thank you very much. Could you elaborate more on the 0 point bank? I am very interested in that, as a matter of fact. How does that work?
I'd love to go into more detail. And, you know, folks who know me know that I've been speaking about this for over a year now, and that we are running somewhat late in the delivery of this, but that's only because the system got better and better and better. And we've seen in the course of the last year, certainly since summer last year, we have seen that with the IT developers and the extraordinary economists who are working to develop, and economics brains who are developing that IT infrastructure, we have seen that it is going to become the wellspring of self-determining prosperity and abundance to millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in the world. So we are happy to have slowed down our own desire to throw out an exchange, which we could have done last summer, but it would have been rudimentary. And it would have been hard for us to go back and change the source codes. As you know, that's how these things work. Once you put the source code out, those foundational algorithms determine the shape of how that meme is going to emerge. So I'm glad that we held back, even if it was a disappointment to some of our new earthers. But we're at a point now where we're going to be launching that. And let me just explain, Roger, that bundling into the New Earth Exchange, the 0 point exchange, is the ID, the sovereign identification process. Mm-hmm. So the whole business of bundling and having your ID card, which is also your bank card, and having an online platform which offers all of these tools for pure expression, unhindered by the governments or by the banks, is what we are effectively getting ready to launch. And that is standing in pure law again, and it's governed by its own law jurisdiction with its own special prosecutors who will be issuing liability notices and private prosecutions against any government or institution or society or individual wet ink signatory, so-called official or oath keeper out there who wishes to screw with your self-elected sovereignty. Once you have disengaged the false contract with governments, which is the birth certification and all the assumptions that are piled onto that process, once you have disavowed them, stepped away from them, engaged your own declaration of sovereignty, established your own micronation status, again, as an individual or a family or a community, and have treated to the New Earth Nation, that is where that supranational extraterritorial protection kicks in. You can take a card, an ID card, bank card, and there will be 0% charged by us on anything ever. The bank, when I say us, I'm not even the exchange, but the New Earth Exchange, bank exchange, is not a bank per se. It's an exchange, and it will never fleece people. It's a 0 point banking system. And it is, I would love to share more information. Actually, this Sunday, we're doing a symposium with Foster Gamble and Max Igan and Noam Chomsky, Paul Craig Roberts, and And on that event, which I'm co-hosting with Paul Sales, which is on Big Brother Out of Control, we're going to be making some pronouncements about what I'm discussing here. So I'm not going to give too much out right now. Anyone interested, tune into the symposium, which is being done through New Earth .events. I think it is newearth.events should take you to that. It's a free online symposium. But at the end of that, we're going to be announcing the tools that I'm talking about here, Roger.
Understood, and we signed up for that as well. So your tribe basically have set this up to where it's going to be very difficult to basically impregnable for usurpers to come in to take it over like they have with Bitcoin and other alternative monetary sources out there, yeah?
Well, I'm no expert in economics, okay? I'm an expert in screwing with the economic paradigm and dreaming up ideas that challenge it and address it. And certainly, I've been doing this for well over a decade. I will tell you that my intuitive sense of Bitcoin is not very settled in my stomach. I think there's a lot of covert elements behind Bitcoin. I'm not suggesting that the originators are covert, but I'm suggesting that it still leaves a bad taste in my intuitive gut. And that's because it's too connected to the legacy system. We're interested in 0-point economics. We're interested in no inflation whatsoever, ever, under any circumstances. We are interested in the value of exchange being backed up by that which is real and not that which is fictitious. What is real is fellowship. What is real is love. What is real is creativity. What is real is your own creative output. Okay? Is apples and oranges that you farm. Is clay pots that you make with your hand. Is technology that you deliver to the world and gift to the world in the right way. So whatever you do, whoever you are, no matter how lowly you imagine yourself to be, you are your own currency. Okay, your reputation is your currency. Your capacity to love and be loved is the signature of your currency. Do not be told anything otherwise, ever, by a godless behemoth system that wants you to feel lowly, wants you to feel disenfranchised, wants you to feel like the great unwashed.
All right, you can't go into how it's all going to work and things of that sort, but can you tell me if there will be any kind of physical currencies that people will be dealing with, or will it be digital?
Yeah, well, we're inviting every micronation that treaties to the New Earth Nation, and that then treaties to the exchange as well, because there's also an entry gate treaty there. So if you're a community in Colombia and you treaty to the New Earth Nation or to the New Earth Exchange, you define your value. You define your medium of exchange. If it's coconuts, that's great. If it's trinkets, whatever they are, they better be good trinkets, because if people don't want them, you're not going to get anything exchanged. So it doesn't matter what it is. You could be manufacturing hardware, software. You could be offering a service. You could be mowing lawns. You could be a school teacher. You could be a heart surgeon. It doesn't matter. Whatever you are, whatever you bring to the world, not as an exploiter, not as a broker, okay, or as a banker who's going to an office and screwing deals on sugar between one country and another country and going home with a Porsche and $100,000 a week. We do not invite that kind of disgusting exchange in the New Earth Exchange. There is no Jesuit protocol, meaning to say there is no intercessory or intermediary, no broker, no bank in that sense, or banker in that sense as permissioned by our treaty within the exchange. But if you legitimately or lawfully are engaged in a process or offer a service, whatever that service is, that is what backs your currency. So then you can affix yourself to the New Earth Exchange with a profile, and your currency can be affixed into the exchange. People looking for coconuts in Colombia will reach out to you, and you can do your own closed room exchange with whoever wants to buy or exchange. So that's how we're doing. We're taking people away from this notion of money altogether, more into the contributionist or gift economy or pure exchange economy. We don't need money. Money is disgusting. Money is the source code of the devil, if on the temporal plane, if you want to look at it that way. It represents time. It represents fear. Okay? It represents energy harvest of human beings. Money in and of itself is uniquely diabolical. The totem, the gold coin, the silver coin. It does not have fundamental value in itself. People do, and the planet does. So again, for people to engage the 0 point exchange and this new paradigm, this new earth paradigm, people are going to have to, one way or the other, attune themselves either through the heart or through the mind, or preferably both, to what it is we mean when we say 0 point economy, 0 point social ecology, non-exploitative, non-vampiric, non-parasitic engagement by human beings and other human beings.
Right on. All right, the episode of the face-to-face you conducted last night, you were speaking about how you have had people who've been involved their entire lives propping up the old paradigm, and they have come to you 30, 40 years later saying, oh my God, we were flabbergasted basically at the wrongs we have been pulling on people, right, for the sake of propping the system up, and now they are wanting to flip sides, if you will. They want to counterbalance. They want to bring forth their knowledge to assist in the endeavors that you have going on right now with the New Earth Nation, yes?
Yes, we've got many people like that have been joining us over the last year and a half. As I said, we've had parliamentarians connect to us, tax inspectors, people who are deeply embedded in the old legacy systems, who have, one way or the other, seen or heard something we've been engaged with, been quite offended at first, and then looked into the truth of things, of the shocking things that we've been stating and putting out there, and then got reached out invariably to me or the core team and said, wow, I had no idea until we heard a broadcast that you did, or read something that was written. And I'm ashamed to say that my life was co-opted by the system. And I was one of those functionaries, putting my mark on paper, putting my signature to paper, and effectively participating in the great fraud and the great harvest of humanity. And what can I do to now serve? So yeah, it's a beautiful, and this is the thing, Roger. I am so not a radical activist. I am so not wanting lynch mobs on the streets and all of that stuff. I'm really, to anyone who cares about what I have to say, I'm preaching forbearance. I'm preaching truth and reconciliation. I'm preaching absolution. And this to me is not just because it feels better, but because at the mechanical level, it's necessary if we are to really redeem the old paradigm and then move into a new one that is completely clean and uncluttered with old energetics. We need to transcend all the acrimony, all of the antipathy and the anger that we all feel. And we all feel it, be sure. Those of us, again, who are not gargling babies' blood in basements are feeling that anger. We're feeling that outrage. And believe me, that's going to mount between now and autumn of 2017. You're going to see that on a steep rise, principally in the United States of America. But that is a beautiful thing, because that mounting sense of outrage is what tips the hair trigger of the good Midwestern people of America, the people between New York and Los Angeles. And I maintained for some time that it's going to be the good quantum heart of Middle America that is going to resurrect the entire planet, actually, whilst the world is now railing against America and demonizing America, when America was actually used by European bankers and Ashkenazi cabals and all sorts of other elements going back to, dare I say it, off-world, lower astral interference, historically speaking. America is being set up for the great fall, and I, for one, will be standing shoulder to shoulder with my brothers and sisters in America as the shit hits the fan, which surely it's about to.
Yes, it is. I can tell you that right now. When I was 15 years old, I was walking to my job. I was washing dishes. Yes, this was back in '86. I am walking to this restaurant, which was right next to the highway, and I was walking underneath it. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I was looking at all the millabouts running around, chasing the buck, and I said out loud, "You mother effers have no idea what's coming." And I had no idea that we were going to be seeing this stuff in my lifetime, our lifetime, but I knew it was coming. All right. And there's a lot more going on there as well. But the thing is, I've had myself personal encounters with other worlders. All right. I don't talk a lot about it, about the experiences themselves, but I will say that I have done enough investigations into the different governments of the planets, the heavy hitters, Russia, China, America. Well, America being the city of London, Rome, and Washington D.C., of course. But apparently, the other worlders from above have brought their war down here to, the forefront, to the planet. And in all actuality, I feel that those who are stepping up and being the mouthpieces, Putin, Obama, and whomever else you want to throw into the mix, they are being told what to do, apparently, by those who are hiding behind the proverbial veil. What do you have to say about that?
Roger, I've got a lot to say about that, and I could speak at great length on this. But I'll be quite frank with you, I don't wish to here. And the reason I don't wish to is because it is such a loaded subject, and the ramifications are so enormous, epic, that it warrants a great deal more than a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute interlude. It's stuff that needs to be treated very, very mindfully. I've just came back from Java in Southeast Asia, where I met with the proverbial King of Kings, the proverbial holder of the Solomon Seal. For any of those out there who know about that story, it's one story that exists in the world. I'm not going to get into that story right now, but I know what I saw when I was there. I know who I met. I saw the fire in the eyes, and the conversation I had, which was 2 hours, which was filmed, surrounded by a delegation, an international delegation, who were at the palace in attendance. I drove 2,000 kilometers to get to that meeting through treacherous conditions, I don't mind telling you. And I know what I saw. I know why I went. I know why that meeting was important. I know why he wanted to have the meeting as well. And that film is coming out late. What are we now?
April.
We're April. So I'm late already in that film. But in May, we're going to be releasing that film. And in that, much of what you're talking about is going to be addressed in that film, and that is connected to the galactic history aspect of the now, and the assassination of Tsar Nicholas in Russia at the turn of last century, or near to the turn of last century, and the assassination of JFK, the sequestration of $900 trillion worth of gold, 85% of the world's gold supply, which incidentally is controlled by the brush stroke, the stroke of the pen of this individual who I met with. And there are other elements that I'm very familiar with because I know the principles. I've spent time with them, including the head of the external Russian intelligence, or erstwhile KGB, that I spent 3 days with pretty much, and met at a safe house in somewhere in Europe late last year. And I was privy with him in those private meetings to witness, I got a history lesson that I would wish on everyone on earth from this extraordinary individual. And I was also able to witness and read and handle about, I don't know how many hundreds of legacy documents, treaties that go back hundreds and hundreds of years, and that form the foundation of many of our governments, many of our territories on earth, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and so on. fascinating stuff. And then learning from that individual, who is one of the more remarkable souls on the planet for sure, almost impossible to get to. But I learned from him a side of this story that I never knew about, that once I heard it from him, and once he pointed things out on the World Atlas, on a wall, and once he showed me key documents, I was able to hit my forehead and go, fuck, yeah, that makes sense. Now I get that whole black hole, that blind spot. The same thing with A1 Sino, the King of Kings. Many believe he's the real stuff. Others believe that he's Satan incarnate. Many people are simply projecting their own fear complexes onto that scenario. There are other people that we engage with right now, so-called white hats, people who are, these Templar and Masonic elites who are purportedly have controlled the world's global banking supply. Certainly they've been, not banking supply, banking story, but not the ones connected to the Jesuits in the House of Rothschild, but actually the Goodley crew. There've been engagements with their representatives and not just their representatives, actually the head of the order in the last few months. I don't want to say any more than that, except that my own life and my own inquiry and my own access to these folks is directly engaged in wanting to understand the holonomic, or the holographic story, because it's such a multidimensional story. And when you are sitting in front of, as I have done with a head of state who's talking about extraterrestrials, and I've spoken to ministers on this matter, and I've spoken to countless people in portals of power on the subject of extraterrestrial intervention. Not that I need their guidance on any of the above. I absolutely know in my own witness who and what we are as hominids. Homo sapiens sapien is the galactic experiment. We are the hybrid, the third density hybridization of countless interdimensional, interdimensional and superdimensional intelligence, as well as 3D species. We are that net result. We are the center of the universe in that sense, the third density field universe. I fundamentally believe that to be so, and that we're going to learn that to be so. This idea that we're just a planet floating in the middle of a solar system in a galaxy on the outer fringes of a quadrant of the universe, which itself is an element within the multiverse, which itself is an element within the omniverse. I mean, Christ, we could go on all day.
Right.
But all of it's bullshit. All of it's bullshit, because I can tell you here and now that I am the center of the universe, as you are. And all of us engaged in pure witness, when we are fully actuated in the business of being here now, are the center of it all. And we have to own that in order to enter that multidimensionality. If you don't own that, you will never enter that multidimensionality. The doors will be closed to you because you have not opened them. So make of that what you will. Lots of fundamentalist Christians will be running around loading up shotguns and wanting me hung because I'm claiming to be the Christ. That's not so. I'm claiming that we are all of us the Christ flame once we engage that living principle, which is called pure truth. But then any fundamentalist anywhere on earth wouldn't know pure truth if it hit them over the head with a sledgehammer. That's because they're too drunk on their own Kool-Aid. But no more of that rant. I know the story you're alluding to. I just don't. Isn't that interesting? I said I don't want to go into it because it needs more than 20 minutes. I've probably taken more than 20 minutes in.
Okay.
But we can speak about that subject in another conversation. I would suggest you take 2 hours for it, and we can drill down into it.
You're on. Now, are we divinely protected in standing in our own truth, basically?
Yes, when we know ourselves to be the living aspect or emissary of that divine source, then yes, those permissions are invoked and evoked. But where we do not, where we stand slightly to the left of that pure truth flame, then we are vulnerable to attack, so to speak. either physically in the physical sense or in the astral and psychic sense. So again, when one is standing fully attuned to that flame, then one is standing in Godhead and able to determine any outcome by affixing pure intention. And if that sounds like idealistic waffle to someone, then I'm assuming that that someone is drunk on being a lawyer or a banker or a wanker, for that matter, and they wouldn't understand the resonance of what I'm speaking to. But anyone who has had extraordinary events or circumstances in their lives, in the spiritual sense, will understand absolutely that what I'm saying is so. So when we know our divine provenance, then we can activate it, and that becomes all of the protections that one needs. But in my not so humble view, the greatest protection we can have is to drop the word. Drop the word altogether. The word is the bond. The word is the lie. The word is the covenant. The word is the spell. Drop the word. There is no need to be protected. How can one be protected from anything if one is multidimensional? If one is eternal and infinite? It is a nonsense to even construe these notions and hold them to be true. So let go of it, release oneself from it.
Thank you. See, I was wrestling with that in my own head before I actually asked the question, but I put it out there anyway. If you are standing in your own truth, you're not going to need protection because you're protecting yourself in essence, yeah. So I would like to ask you then, what is the Jesuit code and how did you come to know about it? When did you come to know about it?
I've learned about this only by pursuing, again, this inquiry for many long years, and very steadily come to witness things, engage in thousands of conversations and meetings with a great many affluent and powerful people, also people of tremendous wealth and privilege, many of them very, very good, and some of them not so good. But in understanding the geometry of life, which is hard enough at the best of times, but when one removes one's own egoic projections from one's own reality field, then that which is remains. And I have observed that landscape sufficiently to know the truth of certain things. And then one corroborates those findings with research, a great deal of research and a great deal of reading historical pieces, bearing in mind that one can never take history for face value. What you read is always tempered by the writer, from the Benedictine monks all the way through to modern historians who are, whether they know it or not, on a Fulbright scholarship or connected to some agenda or some conceptual framework, which they then imbue into their writing. So one has to be careful always in reading words on paper. They are all contracts. They are all inviting to your confidence on paper and binding your attention and then your belief to what you read, what you think you now know. So again, I don't want to become too pedantic here, but it's such an important distinction. One cannot just research and read and then pass on the law of first report because you read it somewhere and because it resonated with you, man. There's a lot more than just that in discovery of pure truth. Again, if one walks into the world with a burning question in the heart, the universe or the universal mind will conspire to present you with a event or a circumstance or a relationship which embodies the perfect answer to that question. And there we are needing to learn from those engagements, and they become our true repertoire of witness, of firsthand experience. And it's on that is the premise of my learning is those kinds of engagements. The Jesuit code is something which prevails in everything and everyone who is standing outside of that flame of pure truth. Again, if one is not standing directly beneath central sun, which is one's highest truth, then one is casting a shadow. And so long as one is casting a shadow, that shadow needs to be addressed before one can step back into that central sun. So life itself, the dynamics and the metric of life itself is the great taskmaster. It forces us ultimately into addressing what is real and what is not real. In my own journey, the Jesuit code has emerged as being, again, the Jesuits didn't exist before the Society of the Army of Christ, dreamt up by Ignatius Loyola a few hundred years ago. So what existed before that, I would have called some other code, Anunnaki code, or God knows, Baphomet code, or whatever. But I call it Jesuit code in the modern context, Roger, because that's what it is in the modern context. The Jesuit cloak has prevailed. The Hegelian dialectic of the end justifies the means is what drives the disgusting activities of governments and central banks and the multilateral institutions that govern us. So when you've got some idiot in a skirt called Hillary Clinton, who's now masquerading as a human being on the world stage, and she's now saying, people have to learn that the individual doesn't matter. It's society that matters. We need to forego the individual in favor of what's best for society. Well, now that's classic Jesuit code coming out of the mouth of a subhuman, okay? A classic Jesuit code, which means to say, shut the fuck up. Your opinion means nothing, grandma or kitty, whoever you are. Your opinion does not matter. Your own sentient spark does not matter. You will be subsumed into the Borg mind. Democracy will slowly devour your sensibilities, because democracy, please recall, is where 51% get to eat the other 49% for breakfast and then shit on them. So that is what democracy eventuates into. It's 51% happy and 49% desperately unhappy. Well, that's not a functioning social ecology. That's a social ecology that's at loggerheads with itself and which is fundamentally at war with itself. And therefore, democracy itself is a disgusting facade. And the sooner America, of all countries, elevates itself and transcends the notions of democracy, the better, because it is precisely that kind of idiom and that kind of totem that you guys have swallowed, meaning to say Americans have swallowed wholesale. The same thing with liberty and fraternity by the French. They swallowed that bullshit years ago and have held true to it, and it hasn't served them very well. So there you go. I hope I've put it this way. That's the end of my rant on the Jesuits. Just that it's important that people look around and see that the Jesuit code prevails in banks and banking, where banks stand between us and our capacity to self-determine our prosperity and abundance. And governments are Jesuit code incarnate in that they stand between human beings and our divine right to self-govern and self-determine and make free will choices, provided we don't do harm to others. And hospitals and their attendant big corporate sponsors, the pharmaceutical corporations, stand between us and our wellness and our capacity to engage with healing and wellness. And of course, they're backed up by governments now, which outlaw herbs and outlaw, things that make us well, like cancer. So the Jesuit code prevails in every element of our lives, provided we can see it. Teachers and the education system, like all systems, are not designed to serve human beings. They're designed to harvest human time and energy and collateralize human time and energy into money or gold. So it goes on. So the Jesuit code, in short form, Roger, is imbued in every single aspect of our lives, and we are dying to it.
Thank you very much. How do we get the individual leaders to come together to agree on how to live?
I understand the question, Roger, and the answer is very simple. You don't attribute leaders with any leadership. Step away from leaders and leadership altogether. Again, if you become a conscious, sovereign, living man or living woman on the soil, wherever you are, and you could be in a high-rise in Manhattan, that's okay, that's still soil. Step away from the myth of power. Step away from government. Step away from giving your consent to be governed by some dick in a suit or a skirt. Just stop it. Stop it. Step into your sovereignty. Step into your divinity. Step into your auto-determining pure truth, reality, field of expression and creative expansion. Step into the real and step out of the fictitious. So that's the only question worth asking, not whether you're going to be able to sell, get your representatives to sell the right snake oil back to you. Why would you want to engage that silly game? Simply determine how you want to self-govern, determine how you want to exchange or commercialize your time and energy in life, and then use that as a collateral for exchange. Make that determination yourself and make it so. You can do that. You can revoke and step outside of all of the invisible and false contracts that exist between you and the people that own your building, or that think that they own your flesh and bones by virtue of the birth bond and the passport and birth registration. So step outside of all of those fictions in a fairly simple process, and then decide how you want to. But why are we asking? You've just asked a question, which is a legitimate one. I understand it, which is, how are we going to get our leaders to? I'm saying stop thinking like that. Stop thinking in terms of leaders leading us, because that is the goddamn problem in the first place. Leaders will always lead us where power draws them. And power will only ever draw them to the Luciferian principle, which is false light worship. Because that's what power does in the temporal sense. It can only ever do that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Step away from it. I do not consent. You do not represent me. If you do anything that harms me, I will come after you, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Senator, Mr. Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Pope of Rome. I will come after you and your wet ink signature. But I will come after the living man behind the seal of office, behind the facade. I will come after you, and I'll bring my brothers and sisters, and we will come after you. The living man, Queen Elizabeth, not the Queen of England, Elizabeth, the woman, standing behind the throne, the naked emperor behind the curtain. We will come for you. You're in our sights. We know who you are. This is not a declaration of war. It's a declaration of love. Love for pure truth and love for the reclamation of dignity.
The question is now, what do you do with people who do not recognize that love within themselves? How do you go, and do you lock them up? What the hell do you do with them?
No. Well, in some cases, if they are psychotic and have clear chemical imbalances in the brain, then yes, of course, one restrains them. But in the main, the extension of perfect love, perfect absolution, compassion, forgiveness, one to another, is all the remedy that will bring any sentience back into its true form. Now, look, having said that, we are dealing with multi-generational Satanists in many cases. We're dealing with people who conduct ritual sacrifice of innocence in order to empower draconian astral energies into their own being, in order to vicariously live in and amongst the human family. So we're dealing in some cases, and in many cases, in point of fact, with pretty nefarious and diabolical entities. And they are beyond reclamation. They're beyond redemption. They're beyond, in some cases, beyond absolution. And those creatures will be flushing themselves out, as they're already doing. They will be twisting and writhing in broad daylight.
Where do they go from there, though?
Well, that they will do unto themselves ultimately. I mean, whether they get lynched in market squares or whether they hold themselves off buildings or whether they, who knows? There's going to be many countless examples that we will retrospectively be able to speak to in a few years' time. But I would simply suggest that, again, if one is standing in one's sovereign space and pure truth, you will not be harmed by the apocalypse that is upon us. In the first instance, if one is truly attuned to Christ and to the understanding of Christ and the understanding of the essence of all of the great religious disciplines, then one is protected in the first instance. So don't concern yourself too much about yourself. But in the same way that Daniel in the lion's den teaches us by apocryphal story. Walk in a straight line. How do we deal with judges in courtrooms who are defiling natural justice every day of their lives and are operating as cashiers on behalf of a commercial judicial system, which is simply an outrider to the central banks and the Babylonians that drive the shadow governments? Well, dealing with those judges is a relatively straightforward matter. Mass citizens arrest is the obvious one that is going to happen. Accredited private attorney generals in the United States will be conducting arrests next year and the year after of the 3,500 judges in the United States that are still standing in dishonor by wearing the devil's smock and conducting fraud and treason against the true sovereign, which is the people. So you're going to see PAGs conducting those arrests and bounty hunters conducting those arrests and seizures. Also claiming against the bonds of the judges, that's also going to be happening imminently, which will teach a great many of them to sort themselves out and get back into true with natural justice. But you have to understand that most of the judges in the United States are idiots in costumes as well, and they may be very scholarly and have read many lengthy tracts in law, but they have each one of them failed absolutely to understand the meaning of law, let alone the rule of law. So they are all of them conducting fraud and treason by virtue of receiving a salary from the state and then prosecuting living men and women on behalf of the state. In fact, they're not prosecuting the living men and women, they're prosecuting the trusts that living men and women represent by virtue of their birth bonds. And just so happens that the living man or woman, their blood and bones, gets carted off to jail to stand as collateral. So it goes on. The judges are all of them standing in fraud and treason and will be held accountable. That's going to happen. And that's going to be happening very soon, certainly within next year and 2017. We're going to see a huge sea change there in judiciaries, principally again in the United States, United Kingdom, and the more developed nations of the world, which of course are the nations which have franchised the defilement of law to the rest of the world. So you've got also idiots in black smocks in Nigeria and in Ecuador and in different parts of the developing world who are emulating the white man's poison, the bullshit that we taught to them, franchised to them after we had looted their natural resources and conducted mass genocides of their populations. We left them with a few ugly toys like the legislature, the parliamentary system, the judiciary, but all of that is going to flip around very, very quickly in the coming few short years ahead.
Will these individuals be tried through the International Tribunal?
That is correct. The ITNJ avails itself as that jurisdiction and certainly is accredited under universal law and the highest iterations or expressions of trust and equity. It stands as the jurisdiction that is most capable of enacting that jurisprudence. So the answer is yes, but one hopes and assumes that a great many other jurisdictions standing under universal law and natural justice will be springing up all over the world. And tribunals, citizens, grand juries, and Truth and Reconciliation Commissions as well. I hope that the templates that we've been involved in initializing will go some way toward that planetary effort. But I can tell you that I know enough about the background turmoil in governments and also at the multilateral level of governance to tell you that the organs of multilateral governance are in a state of free fall themselves. They're all of them standing in foreclosure, in fraud, and in treason. These are serious charges. So once you start to educate the functionaries in those systems, one by one, and the oath keepers, the public servants and civil servants, once they become awakened to this horror story that they themselves have been co-opted into maintaining a Canaanite ritualistic paradigm, all the goodly folks there will bail very quickly, or they will reform internally very quickly. It's already happening in some cases around the world in different institutions. And that's something that we should all be participating in. But those individuals that are still clinging hard and fast to the Jesuit code within those establishments will hurt very badly. They will hurt very, very badly indeed. The ones that are not transitioning now, the ones that are not beginning to participate in the offerings that are there for them to transition will hurt very badly.
Can you speak about where the ITNJ will be headquartered?
I am not the expert on the ITNJ. I'm a founder of the ITNJ, but the experts are in the Chief Justice, Sir John Walsh and Rebecca Cope, and our ITNJ committee, the ITNJ Commission of international experts in law, and the barristers and law experts, as you mentioned, like Chris Cleverly. These are the people who you would want to ask these questions of. I can speak in very simple terms that the ITNJ will begin prosecuting the parent corporation, which is the overarching entity that presumes and has historically presumed to conspire in turn to construe the manifestation of nearly 200 corporations masquerading as governments on Earth. And that parent corporation will be held to task. And it will be held to task by the inertia of its own functionaries, actually, which is what's already happening. The ITNJ is just a platform, a court, a jurisdiction which offers itself up to that realization. But in any event, if anyone there studied the Rod Class case, which is a case which is being, as I understand it, being brought before that court, contained within the Rod Class case is all of the evidences, paper trails and forensic evidences needed to conduct that prosecution. And we have prosecutions there, prosecutors working and investigators working with us, who are some of the most proficient experts in the world. That will all be revealed I believe, at the ceremonial seating on 15th of June this year.
Very good, thank you. I am sitting here thinking about as well the documentary. Would you call it a documentary being released in May? Because I'm very, very excited to view that. As a matter of fact, will it be a pay-per-view kind of thing? Will it be free to those who register?
Yes, essentially yes. The documentary that I'm putting out relating to my recent trip to Java is going to be coming out in May, and that's going to be released, I believe, through New Earth. New Earth events, I think it is, so that's going to be offered out freely. All the stuff that we do is given out freely.
All right, thank you very much. 2 questions for you. The first one, what advice do you have for everyone just coming into being through sentient self-responsibility? And the second one is, when can we do this again?
First answer is, I'm going to repeat what dear Dean Clifford espouses. He teaches a very beautiful truism, which is that your natural rights end where another's begins. And that's a very beautiful thing to consider, that your natural rights end where someone else's begin. And that teaches you compassion, it teaches you mindfulness, it teaches you love, it teaches you communion and fellowship with all beings. And consider them, whether they're a cat or a dog or a horse or a goat or a human being. Your rights extend only to where another's begins. So that teaches you do no harm. And to those people setting out on the path of righteousness and of right action, I would only suggest be mindful of that profound truism, that you can do, think, be, express all that you wish in this world. And you must do and think and become and express all that you want in this world, but you must do so provided you do no harm to another. And by harm, I do not mean offending a fundamentalist's sensibilities. That is not causing harm. That is extension of pure truth. And if it hits them over the head like a sledgehammer, best of luck to them. The second answer to the second question is, I have to refer you to my PA, Arahia, who runs my schedule, because she handles my life and I only get my schedule the night before a day. But I had a delightful conversation with you here, Roger. I've been really happy to be on it.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you for appearing on the show today. I will be speaking to you again soon.
Great.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, brother.